Welcome to another episode in the Putting It All Together series. In this video, we're going to be talking about HTML forms. We're not going to be talking about validating the forms yet. We'll do that when we talk more about JavaScript. But in this video, we're just going to talk about the creation of the form itself. So remember this site, I really only have one form on the site. There's nothing here. There's nothing here as far as forms go. Nothing here. And then finally here we have our contact form. So that is the subject of today's video. This form, if you notice, has several elements. It has two text fields. It has a set of radio buttons, and it has a text area and also a button. To make sure that you understand the difference between radio buttons and checkboxes. I don't have any checkboxes on here, but they are the square buttons you can click instead of circle. Circle buttons or radio buttons can only have one in a group selected. So you could be interested in all of these types of chandeliers, but which one's your favorite? We're only allowing one favorite. So by default, it says gas, which is the oldest of the types of fixtures on this site. The next is the gas-electric combination. And the last is the early electric. I don't think I have any early electrics on here. I've restored a couple, but I don't have any on here. But anyway, that's what we have. And again, only one can be checked. Now, what if I had instead done chandeliers types you're interested in? Now, in that case, there could be multiple ones that you're interested in. I would put that I was interested in all of those, but you might be just interested in one or the other. For me personally, with my favorite, it's going to be the gas-electric combination. And the reason being that they just have a lot of character about them. They just aren't what you would anticipate seeing. So to me, they have a lot of character. So that's what I would personally choose. But I defaulted it to the oldest, which is also not just because it's the oldest, it's also the first in the list. And that's normally what we do for defaults for a radio set. Now, a checkbox set, I would most likely, if I was saying which ones are you interested in, I would have none of them checked. So the user would have to go check whichever ones they want. Or if I was just sure they were going to like most of them, I would check them all to begin with, and then they'd have to uncheck them. But normally, what you normally see is you see them without the checks to where the user has to check them if they are interested in them. So anyway, the radio buttons, the name comes, and if you, the name comes from the old car radios where you press one button in and another pops out. I have one in an old car that I have, that classic car that has an AM and an FM, two different buttons. You press the AM, the FM pops out. You press the FM, the AM pops out. One has to always be there, selected. And it makes sense. You can't listen to both AM and FM frequencies at the same time. And if you're going to listen to the radio, you can't listen to neither. It has to be one of those two. So for that radio. So it works very well as a radio button, and that's where the name comes from. So with that said, I just wanted to throw that out there about the checkboxes and radio buttons. Let's go ahead and go through the code for this form. And I believe I've mentioned before, this form uses a table to organize the data. You do not have to use a table to organize your data in a form. So let's look here. It's in the contact page. All this JavaScript up here we'll deal with in a future lesson. Lots of JavaScript. But here we go now, down to here. So we have our navigation, blah, blah, blah. We have our image, etc. We have this UL, which just to give you a reference point on the page is right here. That's the UL. And then we have a paragraph for our air image, which we used in JavaScript. So you haven't seen this yet. You've seen it work, but see, when I click Submit Survey, it shows right there. So there's nothing in there by default. It's just a paragraph, and you see there's nothing there, but it has an ID of error message that I'm going to use with the JavaScript code later. So then we start our actual form. Form ID is contact us. Action, so where do you want to go, is results.htm. Non-validate, or no validate, sorry, equals no validate. I'm not, HTML does have the potential of doing default validations, like making sure something isn't empty or making sure a particular field's a number. I don't like their validations personally, and you'll see why when we get to the JavaScript part, because the JavaScript part, we can really custom our validation to be exactly what it needs to be, not a generic mistake, and also one that is formatted very nicely as well. So that's why I don't do the validations on these. So then I have my table, and my table goes all the way to here, and then my form closes. So all of my form elements are in this one table. So let's go through it. I know we've talked about the table before, but I kind of need to do it again in order for us to get to the elements. So our first row uses a single table header cell with column span 3, fill out the form. And if you remember, that's what this part is here. I'll refresh the page so those errors go away. That's this part right here. So that takes us to there. We close that row, we open a new row, and then we have name, and we have an input. And so I have just a cell for name right here, and then I have the input. Input, and there's many types. The type is text. That will produce a text field. And then we have a name. I named my name because that's what they're entering there. But notice I use an uppercase N, so it's not exactly the same. And then my ID is username. And you may say, well, why didn't you make the name to be also username or uname or something like that? And the reason I didn't do that is when you send the data from the form somewhere else, when the form's submitted, it sends it in name value pairs. And so the name, it would be nice before the value, say the name's Joey. It'd be nice if it said name Joey, not uname Joey or in Joey. I want it to actually make sense when it comes through in the name value pairs. So that's why I wanted it to be name. And then I have another cell that's empty for the error that, again, we will deal with when we are working with the JavaScript. The next one, age, that's the next row. So we finish that row, we start a new row. We have age in a cell by itself. And then we have an input. The name is age again because the name value pair, I want it to be right. Oh, it's also a type of text. It's an input with type text. And the ID is little age. And then I have one more cell in that row. That's an error tag for age, or an error holder, I should say, not a tag, an error holder. It's just an empty table cell. And that's right here. That row closes. New row. Now this row goes from here to here. This row is the biggest row. And this one contains our radio button set. So the first cell, I just have favorite type of chandelier. So if you come look over here, favorite type of chandelier. And then I close that TD, I open a new TD, and I have its column space as 2. I did this for a couple reasons. One is with how it looks, I wanted all the radio buttons to be next to each other. And the second reason I was able to do this is since one is already selected by default, they can't unselect them all. So I don't need an error message. They can't select more than one, and they can't unselect down to 0. They have to have at least one selection. So I'm not worried about an error. There's no ability for an error on this particular field. So I don't need that extra table cell over there for the error. Input type radio, ID equals gas. Name equals chandelier favorite. Value is gas, checked is true. So when you have a text box or a text field, you have the name value pair sent at the end of the form when they click submit. The value is whatever's in the text box. But for a radio button, we don't have a value. It's just either checked or not. So we get to set our value up here. And so what I want it to come back as is gas for the first one. So it'll say chandelier favorite, gas. And then I have one more thing in this tag, one more attribute, checked equals true. And that defaults that one to be the true one. I don't want that in any of the others because it would just overwrite the one that was already checked. And so I want it to just have one checked. I want it to be the first one. Okay, then I have something kind of important here. Label for gas. And then it says gas. Close label. What is this about? Well, you can label some controls in your forms. So it looks like text on the outside to the user, but when you have, first of all, it formats it right there next to it. That's a nice thing. And the other thing is, even more important, it works for screen readers. So it will actually read out, this is a label for this radio button. So I just have label and then the attribute for, and then I set that for equal to gas, which is the ID of the previous radio button. And then I put what I want to put there as the text, which is just gas. And then I close the label. I do this again, the same thing for the other two, except I don't have the checked property. So take a look at it. Input type radio, ID is gas electric. Name is chandelier favorite. Value, gas electric. Label for gas electric. And then I put gas electric combination. That's what they will see. It'll also be read to them if they have the screen reader. And finally, input type radio. ID is early electric. Name chandelier favorite. Value early electric. So the name value. And then I have a label for early electric, what the ID was, and then the name of it, early, or what I want the text of it to be, I should say, early electric. Now, I'm hoping that some of you have a question here at this point and say, Mr. Arnold, why are all three of them named the same thing? Shouldn't they be named different things like gas favorite, gas electric favorite, electric favorite? And no, they shouldn't be. This is correct. What's happening here is that the name as chandelier favorite being the same makes them, or makes the browser know this is a radio button set and not to allow multiple items to be selected at the same time. It also works well for the name value pair, because I don't want something like this. Gas favorite, true. Gas electric favorite, false. Electric favorite, false. I don't want to say that. If I know which one's their favorite, I don't need to know about the other two that aren't their favorite. So by having it named gas chandelier favorite, the one that's selected will pass its value when the form is submitted. So if I have gas selected, and at the end it's going to pass the name chandelier favorite, and then the value is gas. And it won't spend time with the other two. So that's very important to understand and realize. Okay, so now we end that cell, we end the row, we start a new row. This time, we are going to do a column span of 3. So we're right here. And with our column span of 3, we're going to have label for comments. So I did another label on this control. And it's comment / question. And it's for the element with ID comment or comments. And here is that text area ID comments. And the name I have as comment. Now I don't want the name the same as the other things. It's something different. So whatever they enter in it will be the value, just like the text boxes. And then I specified a size, row of 6, columns of 40. So what that should mean is there's room for 6 rows and 40 characters wide. Okay. Now, that's all for that row. I don't have anything else there. So then I close that row, I open my final row. This one I also have a column span of 3. And I have another input type, but this time it's not text or radio or anything. It's submit. And the value is submit survey. And I have an ID, in case I need to reference it, of submit survey. Close the cell, close the row, close the table, and finally, close the form. So to sum it up here, table has 1 row in it here, with, one cell in this row. This row has 3 cells. This row has 3 cells, but 2 of them, 1 in each you aren't seen yet, which is the error. Like that. Favorite type makes use of radio buttons, not checkboxes. Make sure you remember the differences. And finally, the text area. That is also another type of input. And its value is going to be whatever is placed in it. I hope this video was really helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.